Welcome back to the Communication Collaboration. Our guest this time is the activist. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm 25 and I am currently working and helping take care of my sick father. I like to ride motorcycles. I like to garden. Super in the idea of, being self-sufficient one day. I'm super passionate about a lot of social justice issues, or social injustice issues, I should say. I'm an avid podcast listener. I really like the Stuff You Should Know. Gotta shout that out. But yeah, I just, do my thing.
Well, what do you want to talk about?
I think that I want to touch on what I have pretty much been arguing with people about all day long today. Like I told you before, I woke up at 4 a.m. just in the mood. I was going to engage anyone and everyone that I disagreed with, which I haven't for a while. I'm sure that you understand that. Arguing with people and, being passionate about how you feel is extremely exhausting.
Yeah, it is.
Especially whenever you're trying to persuade the other person or show the other person like where you're coming from or how you feel.
Right.
But yeah, so I it's actually kind of funny. I was reading comments and I really value old veterans who want nothing more than to uphold their oath to the Constitution, that above everything else.
Right.
All too often, I will see people in the military who unfortunately don't, or they have a screwed interpretation of the Constitution and what it's about. And I had this gentleman just absolutely going to bat for a Marine who was standing in front of some type of government building, and he was holding a sign. He was in his dress blues as well. His sign said, justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and countless others. And a lot of people were ripping him apart in the comments.
Why?
They said that he shouldn't have been in his dress blues and taking that political stance. So I had, I was just reading, and this, by the picture I could tell that it was this cute, sweet, old-looking man. And he really just laid down the knowledge about how, like he took an oath, which is apparently different than the oath that is taken today. He said it was a forever oath. And that meant that he was going to defend the Constitution and defend the American people. And, by that Marine being in his dress blues, he was well within his rights. He was standing up for an injustice. He wasn't protesting something.
Right.
And people were just going back and forth in the comments, and I remember I really appreciated him because it feels like older people, and I don't want to just kind of like lump everyone in a sum, but
By older, what age group?
Baby boomers.
Okay, boomers.
But it feels like their views are just dramatically different than my own or people my age. So whenever I see someone that, their thinking aligns with my own, it makes me feel better, I guess. Especially now, because everything almost feels like a constant fight. Whether I engage it or I don't, it's just everyone's so argumentative, I guess. But I suppose that they need to be for a certain reason. So I just remember seeing him, and I really appreciated him. And then someone else in the comments, they had tried to say that redneck in the N-word was the equivalent, like it had the same weight to it. And I all I said was like, you typed out redneck, however you put literally like the N-word, like, so how can
literally
the N-word, yeah. So if both those things have the same weight to it, why couldn't you write the other out? And so I was trying to explain to him that, that word, because essentially he was saying like, black people can use that word, why can't I? This man was white.
This is a common comment I hear about that.
Yeah. And so, he didn't understand, well, Black people can use it, why can't I? And I tried to explain to him that the N-word was created in a derogatory manner with the only goal of degrading African Americans.
Okay.
The word has been used as a weapon against Black people. And the past few decades, it really feels like people, or Black people specifically, are reclaiming it for themselves. And I think that's really important, because whenever, they reclaim the word, it doesn't have the power that it once had over them.
So do you have a problem with that word?
Oh yeah, I would never say it.
Okay. Do you have a problem with the word redneck?
I do not. No.
Do you have a problem with Black people saying the N-word to each other?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not. And I don't, because, like I said, I feel like I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. The perception of the word is what matters, and the emotions of the person it falls upon. So whenever a white person says it, it's just charged in a different way. And, when we have minorities tell us, like, hey, that is offensive to me, stop. I think that we should listen, and I don't think that it's our job to tell them what is and is not offensive. For so long, that has fallen on deaf ears, and in many ways, it continues. The plight of the oppressed is that they must enlighten their oppressor on how they're impressed. And just arguing with people online, drains me. I can't even imagine how emotionally draining that must be for them. Because above anything else, there is no word for white people that, if levied against a white person, triggers a history of enslavement or comparable trauma. It does not exist. So, I love when people go, what about the word cracker? Well, the origin of cracker comes from whip cracker, so I'll let you connect the dots on that.
Right.
And the N-word is a perfect example of reclaiming language through the subversion of power. So, these communities, these Black communities, flipped it on its head and used it as a term of brotherhood, solidarity, closeness, what have you. So much so that the word, it's just lost its power over them. Another example of that would be, the F word to gay people. So I don't think that it's like I said before, I don't think that it's our place to tell them what does or what should and should not offend them. And I think that we should listen. If you have a friend and they're like, hey, I really don't appreciate it, why would you disrespect them?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if they ask you not to use it, I've never really used the word myself personally. I've heard it used by other white people, and I've heard it used by Black people. And I don't know. It seems like a gray area to me. Not the word itself is offensive. I agree with you there, and I understand you're saying that they've taken it back and given it new meaning, but the original meaning of it was still a negative connotation. It just seems weird to me that they would want to reclaim that word and instead of just let it die in the wind. You know what I mean? And I agree. Redneck is cracker. None of those things are offensive to me personally. Although I did get in a fight in middle school. At that time, the big thing was going around and slapping people on the back of the neck and calling them a redneck. Well, that happened to me one time, and I actually got in a fight at school. And it's not that I was offended by being called a redneck. I think I was just more upset about being slapped in the back of the neck.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my point is, the connotation itself doesn't carry as much weight as the N-word. I agree with you there. And if you do use that word, especially being a white person, I agree. You're looking for an argument. What do you think about white people who model themselves after African Americans using that word?
I also have a problem with that,
Okay.
but that is because I do feel like the Black community is just, they don't have the same rules as everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And, their culture has always just, been really rich in culture. They, super talented musicians have come out of the Black community. Amazing poetry has come out of the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And let's say that someone releases a music video, and it's predominantly Black people, Black produced, Black artists, what have you. Black people will get shit for what they do or how they dress or the way that they wear their hair.
Mm-hmm.
And then white people will come along and essentially copy that culture or that style, say that it's cool, say that it's hip, and then not have the same ramifications.
Right.
So I do have a problem with that. I think
I agree. There's a double standard there. Yeah.
I think that people should give credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
Tons of Black artists are, just so talented and so powerful, but they catch a lot more shit than white counterparts. And I don't think that's.
Why do you think that's an issue?
Like, are you specifically asking about the cultural appropriation, or can you be a little bit more specific?
Yeah. So why do you think that there's such a polar difference between what the white people do versus what Black people do when they're doing the same thing? When you have a Black man who does one thing and a white man who does the exact same thing, it's not viewed the same way. I understand that the argument would be that they're not equal to white people, but like you said, there are a lot of African Americans who have made great contributions, and not just to the United States, to the world in general. And you talk about music and poetry and medical procedures. I know I had to do Black History reports in school coming up, and some of the people that I did reports on, I didn't know about that stuff, and it's like, wow, that's awesome. And to be honest with you, that type of stuff I probably wouldn't have known if we didn't have a Black History Month, because it just isn't. It's not something that we teach, nothing like that.
I wish that I had a direct answer for your question, but I don't think that a few sentences would be able to accurately answer it.
Fair enough.
I think that it goes back hundreds and hundreds of years ago. I don't feel like Black people or minorities have ever had an equal playing field as we do. Just looking back at our history, let's go with the Civil War.
Okay.
The Civil War was fought over the states' rights to slavery, cultural values, economic interest, and the federal government wanting to control the states, and certain states just not being about that. I don't think that there would have been a succession from the Union, no Confederacy, no war, if the South hadn't been so intent on maintaining its peculiar institution. Slavery was the economic engine of the South. It was so profitable, and it produced it was so profitable. It produced more millionaires per capita in the Mississippi Valley, if I remember correctly, than anywhere in the nation. Slaves were extremely essential to the growth and the wealth of the economy. So when talks started about, the possible elimination of slavery, I imagine that it, really worried and definitely anchored Southerners. Whenever Lincoln, who, was elected president, and he was clearly and somewhat vocal about the opposition of slavery, it really worried people. I can't remember how long after Lincoln was elected, but South Carolina was pretty damn quick to secede from the Union. And then they were joined by Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and Louisiana, I believe. And
All southern states.
oh yeah, of course. And so, it was a war that was fought over slavery that lasted 5 years. And, people love to say, well, slavery ended at the end of the Civil War. Like, what's the big deal? Black people have had all this time to just bounce back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just not the case. Just because slavery had ended, that didn't mean that people were any more willing to see them as like their equal counterparts.
Mm-hmm.
And then
well, I don't think they were able to bounce back because, in my opinion, there have always been kind of mechanisms in place that really keep them from doing that.
Oh, absolutely.
You can, now here's the thing, the caveat to that is you can certainly do anything you want and become anything you want here, but listening to and I hate to use the word white privilege, but using the white privilege debate, it is a lot harder for African Americans to do the same thing that it is for Anglo-Saxon Americans to do.
Oh, absolutely. It's systematic.
Mm-hmm.
That it goes, like I said, it goes all the way back to pre-Civil War, and it honestly feels like everything, or almost everything in American history, just has racist tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I was in school, the history was so whitewashed.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't laid out to me, like it was whenever I took a college course.
It seemed like it labeled the 60s as trouble ahead.
Right. And I remember in college I took a American history class and took a African American history class. In the same semester, my African American history class was directly after my American history class. And I remember the counselor or whoever helps with the schedule was like, are you sure you want to do this? And I was sure, because I wanted to see how different, the history was taught. I thoroughly enjoyed my African American history class, but I really was surprised at, still how whitewashed my American history class was, even in college. But yeah, like I was saying, it feels like every corner, it's just Black people are reminded that there's not an equal playing field. After the Civil War, we enter, like the early 1900s, and World War I is going on, and we had so many Black Americans, Black men who wanted to sign up for the war, and they fought in the war. I want to say somewhere of like upwards 300,000 Black men did.
Mm-hmm.
Because they wanted to prove themselves that, they were strong and they were capable, and they did, deserve respect. So they fought in this war, and whenever they came home, people were still incredibly just disgusted with them. I remember I was reading a story about how this army man came home. It was a Black man, and he was in his house, and he ended up getting ripped out of his house by the police. And he was yelling at him like, no, like I'm in the military, and whenever he realized that these cops were going to seriously hurt him, he took off running. They chased him down and lynched him and left him up, until morning, and I want to say like all day the next day. And it served as like a reminder to Black people who had come home from the war, like, despite what you have done for this country,
we still feel the same way about you.
Exactly. And then, we enter Jim Crow laws, which
was a disaster.
Right. President Wilson allowed, which he was in favor of Jim Crow laws, he allowed Birth of a Nation. Do you know what that is?
No, refresh my memory.
Birth of a Nation was a movie that was groundbreaking at the time. It came out in 1915, and it was groundbreaking because it was different than the movies that had come out prior. There was no sound in movies at that time, and usually like orchestras like played what they wanted to play like while the movie was playing. But this was the first movie that had its own set music to go along with said movie. They used like fade outs that had not been used previously. They had a group of like 100 people, but they made it look like it was like thousands of people. Like, it was just, that movie did kind of change the way people made movies after. And that was actually the first movie that was showed in the White House. But the movie was awful. I watched it, and
what was it about?
I watched it in my African American history class. It was about the assassination of Lincoln.
Okay. And
it was about two families. One was from the North, and one was from the South. It touched on the Reconstruction era, which was the 20 years after the Civil War had ended. They had white actors who were playing Black people, and they portrayed them as unintelligent, sexually aggressive towards white women. They had the blackface, and they had the KKK as heroes who used necessary force, I suppose, to preserve the American values. So the movie was intended to be, I don't want to say a documentary, but it was intended to be modeled after historical events of the Civil War. And President Wilson described the movie as history written with lightning, which obviously is super problematic. But they actually used that film almost immediately after it was released as a KKK recruitment video. The KKK at the time was actually, I don't want to say dying out, but it was definitely losing its momentum.
Okay.
But after that movie, it kind of, it sparked it up, and people had a really like screwed, I guess, reality of what the Civil War was actually about. And so, this movie came out, the president, essentially endorsed the movie by playing it at the White House and then making, positive comments about it. And it really did get the American people like riled up. The NAACP, they protested the film with little effect. And, it was really awful. Another thing is the movie had the Confederate flag just all up in it. And the Confederate flag also was just, kind of dying out. And the KKK needed a symbol. And so they ended up, I guess I want to say, adopting the Confederate flag.
Okay.
And they would hang it up around town to, threaten and scare people. It just all over, it wasn't good. And then, we're entering World War II, and Black Americans are again, wanting to fight for our country. And, at the time, it was completely segregated. They gave Black people the labor jobs and, unloading things off trucks. And very few Black men actually, fought in combat, which they were really pushing for. The only branch that did not allow Black people in was the Air Force, which that later changed with the, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it right, but Tuskegee Airmen. Yep. I listened to a wonderful podcast about that. And so, it's just, I feel like there's just such a big shit stains on American history. And you can follow it from when we brought people here to today. We went through segregation, and people love to say, well, hey, after segregation, that was it. And segregate, when the civil rights movement happened, that wasn't that long ago. It was not long ago. Many of our grandparents were alive then. So I feel like racism is just so alive, but in a different way. Obviously, with the examples that I was given, they've never had equal playing ground. And so for people to think that they have equal playing ground today, it blows my mind.
Do you think anything will ever change? Or do you think we'll always be fighting the same fight?
I do think that it has the capability to change. And I hate to say it like this, but I'm sure it's going to get a lot better when all the old racist people die.
I agree.
But it's racism exists in a different way, and it exists in how we police minorities. It has been proven that 2.6 that Black men and women are 2.6 times more likely to be arrested than a white person. They get heavier sentences for the exact same crime as white people. Their communities in general are policed way more. Okay, and you know exactly what I mean. If I'm over near Cervantes, despite the police station being there, there's a lot more cops over there than if I'm over on Bayou Boulevard or Inverness in that area. And the schools that have a lot of minority kids in it, they do not receive the same funding.
And they're also failing schools as well.
So it's just, it's not fair. I feel like education is so important, and these kids are growing up in poverty, and it's likely that they're going to become a product of their environment. And because that's just the normal thing to do. Right. Not everyone is going to fight tooth and nail to get out of that situation.
Right. Especially here too, because this town doesn't have a lot going on to set you up in a positive way.
Yeah.
And that may be Florida in general. I've never really lived anywhere in Florida for long periods of time like I have here, so I can only speak on where I am now. But I do know that, we have no state tax, so it's very beneficial to get these people in the system and to put them on probation.
Exactly.
And to violate them any chance they can get for whatever they can. Yep. And I should point out that some of these things are very minor infractions.
Absolutely.
I do agree with you. There is an unfairness to it. Now, the extent of that, I really can't even begin to touch, just because I don't have my finger on that pulse. I know that you're a lot more active and out there. I know that you had attended a Black Lives Matter rally, and I don't know if you were there when the guy got run over.
I wasn't.
You wasn't?
I wasn't.
Yeah.
Which I feel some type of way about that too.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I think people are just fucking crazy, man. Because, I mean, the thing about it is we can sit here and talk about racism, but the fact of the matter is white people in general just don't like any other race. I don't think I mean, I know we kind of dump on the black people, but I mean, even when the immigrants were coming over here with the caravan last year, that big stink that happened. We didn't want them over here, We don't like black people. We don't like brown people. We don't even like white people unless they agree with us, We can't even get along with each other. I don't know if that's a predominantly white person thing because I see other people do it, but I think we're probably the worst offenders of it.
I definitely think that white people like to pretend that they did not have any part in the making of how it is now, but they did. And the things that people do just continue to contribute, like people who fly Confederate flags. I cannot fathom why you're flying a racist traitor flag, and a losing flag at that. And people love to say, well, it's my heritage. And it's like, do you even know what you're talking about? Like,
some of them I don't think do.
I really don't think so. I think that, they think, like, Confederate flag, South. I'm from, like, it's just, I don't know the mental gymnastics that they go through to think that that's okay, or they just blatantly ignore it. But I from what I've read, it kind of feels like we're the only place that does that. Like, we are not ashamed of our history. Like, I want to say, I don't want to throw the wrong statistic out there, but I do know that it was very high. The amount of Confederate statues that went up was not during the Civil War.
Are you talking about in this area?
No, over the United States.
Okay.
They went up in the early 1900s, in the 50s, and in the 60s, which all were times of serious racial tension. And, they went up in front of, like, government buildings and courthouses and stuff, and it felt like more like a threat. They were not honoring the fallen Confederate soldiers. It felt like a power play. You don't put up a statue, X amount of years after, like, something to, like, for honoring the dead.
And I do get what you're saying, but what would be a correct way to honor Confederate soldiers? I agree that they probably weren't fighting for the right cause, but they were still fathers and sons and
I don't think that we should honor them at all.
Okay.
I think that it should be purely educational.
Okay.
If people are gonna mourn their loved ones, like, from that long ago, I mean, I guess, but I think that there is an appropriate way to, like, have these things. If they want to take down the statue here in Lee Square, which they are, put it up in a museum. Let it be a teaching moment, but it doesn't need to be a monument. Okay, that's not something that we should pride ourselves on for having gone through. I think that a lot of these things would actually do a whole lot better in a museum. People are still able to see it. They're able to learn about it. It's not going anywhere. Germany, you are not allowed to have Nazi memorabilia.
I actually saw a meme that I really wanted to post, but I knew it would start some shit. And it was something about, so you've taken all your statues down, now we'll never know who won World War II or something like that. I forget exactly how it said it, but yeah, that to that effect. We all still know who Hitler was and what he did and what he was about.
Yep.
Even though, from what I'm told, I don't know for sure, the only thing from that time that's still over there are the concentration camps.
Exactly.
So, and obviously you can't really move those or take those down.
They buried, so they also prosecuted, like their generals and stuff.
Mm-hmm,
and whenever they were buried, it was in unmarked graves, so people couldn't make shrines out of them. But a lot of, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So after World War II, Germany tried to scrub that off the face of the earth. It was just very shameful. Obviously, it took a lot longer for everyone to come around, because stuff like the way people think that's just not going to be out the window overnight or at the end of the war. But Germany tried really hard to just like scrub everything away, and that wasn't working out. So then they ended up having like dedicated museums and stuff like that. And it's that's a sad place. That's people are going to learn about just the horror of what happened. They're not like, oh, I got the statue of this general. Like no one's praising their generals and stuff. So
well, let me ask you this: if they do take all of the Confederate statues down, my first question is, how do you feel about Union statues? And my second question is, what do you put in place of those Confederate statues?
I don't have an answer of what we should put in place of it, if anything at all. But I don't particularly feel like the Union was, yes, a lot of people opposed slavery, but the reason why they fought that war was not to end slavery. There were a lot of Union soldiers who felt the same way. So I can't say, or I can't speak on every Union soldier, but I think that if you actively contributed to the death and destruction for unreasonable and racist reasons, your statue should come down.
Gotcha.
I don't think that it's right, and I think that as long as we have stuff like that, people are always going to feel the way they feel. Like racism is taught. If you don't grow up thinking like, oh, this is not right, then how else are you gonna know? Like if it's, I'm trying to think of how to word it, like whenever the whole controversy was going on with Lee Square, people were upset about that statue potentially coming down, who I knew hadn't even thought of that statue before. They really did not care. And so for them to be so outwardly outspoken and hostile about it, I was confused. So I think that it should be taught in school, obviously at like age appropriate levels, what really happened, what America really did, and I think that we need to be accountable, because any history book that I've ever read, there's no accountability, and it's extremely like whitewashed. So I guess I can kind of understand why people don't think that these things like are a big deal, but they're actively contributing to the oppression that Black people still have today. And
well, I don't think white people view them as a big deal. I don't think all white people view them as a big deal, because it's affirmation that plays in their favor.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same connotation on me as it does to an African American.
I mean, can you just imagine being a Black person and just living your life and there's Confederate flags in your face, or Confederate soldier statues? Like, what kind of slap in the face is that?
And we brought them here.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's not like they just threw a dart at a map and said, we're going to go to America and start some shit.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. And it's just, it's such a deep-rooted issue, and I try my best to just correct people as I'm around them. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, you know, or make comments about Black people being on food stamps or Black people being on welfare. And the way that they talk, I know 100% that they have no earthly idea of how these programs really work. I wrote a 5-page essay on TANF, which is welfare, and food stamps in college, and it's just not what people think it is. And I do think that it goes without saying that there will always be people who exploit the system for their favor, but I do not feel like that is a Black thing, or that is a white thing, or you know, that is a Mexican thing. People are just, there's bad people. But you know, I remember asking someone, how much money do you think comes out of your taxes annually for food stamps? And, you know, he was like, oh, I don't know, anything is too much. And I was like, no, seriously, like, I'm trying to have a conversation with you. How much do you think? And he was like, oh, it has to be upward of $300. And I was like, it's less than $3 annually. And I asked him about welfare, and, you know, and he started getting uncomfortable with me, because as soon as you start, you know, calling people out, and especially if you're reasonable, like, hey, that's not correct, they start getting worked up. So I asked him about welfare, and, you know, he said whatever he said, and I was like, it's less than $5. And I told him, I was like, I don't know about you, but I piss $5 away a lot and often. And if less than $10 for both of those programs is coming out of my paycheck annually, and it is helping that mother or that father feed their family, and it benefits the person exploiting the system, I still don't care. I still do not care. And it's, you know, there's so many stipulations for these programs. The national average for you, like, to receive welfare, first of all, it is not a lifelong thing, okay? If you receive, like, some sort of, like, compensation, and it is, like, forever, it is because you are disabled, or, you know, something is wrong mentally, and, you know, so much so that you're just not able to work. But if you're capable working person, the national average is 48 months. Some states, they let you have it a little bit longer, but like I said, national average 48 months. And it cannot be 48 consecutive months. Okay, and this information was coming straight from the government welfare website.
Okay.
It cannot be 48 consecutive months. You can receive it for 12 consecutive months, and there's going to have to be a period of time where you are not on it. And so I remember reading that it's actually really common for people to get on welfare, and then when they don't need it anymore, that's it. You know, they don't renew it or anything like that. I remember that 7 states incorporated drug testing in order to receive welfare, which I felt some type of way about that. You know, that's basically insinuating, like, poor people are more likely to be drug addicts, you know, than the rest of the population. They spent $1 million and found out those people do not do drugs anymore than everybody else. And it's people are just so ridiculous. You know, they'll make these comments, and they have no idea what they're talking about. They're really hurting, they're essentially, you know, like, their fellow American by thinking like that, acting like that, and then just spitting out straight up false information, you know, because someone else is going to come along, and, you know, that false statement that they said is going to agree with, you know, the next person's preconceived notions on the matter, and then they're going to repeat what they said. And it just spirals out of control. And yeah, so I can't stand it whenever people talk about people on welfare and food stamps, because to me, what's sad is the working class people do not make enough money to support their family.
Mm-hmm.
The way it was is that minimum wage paid for, it was basically a family of 5 or 4. Dad could work, mom could stay at home and take care of the kids. They could have a car, and the kids could have a college education.
Mm-hmm.
Minimum wage covered that.
Mm-hmm.
And as time went on, minimum wage stayed the same, but everything else has gone up.
Yeah. The minimum wage does not reflect inflation.
Absolutely not. So even the fact that, I forgot to add, if you are on welfare and or food stamps, you do have to work.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do not work, you have to attend part-time hours, 25 hours a week of job training classes. They will help you get a job until you get a job. You have to work. If you're not working,
That's awesome. I didn't know they did that.
Yes. Right. So total misconception around these government programs. These government programs account for less than 2% of our national budget.
Mm-hmm.
They take more money out of our taxes for the railroads
mm-hmm.
and roads than they do these government programs, and just the hostility that people have towards one another or their fellow Americans is just sickening. Like, people are so concerned about themselves, and if that person is in a bad situation, then it's clearly because they made bad choices, and that is just not the case.
Yeah, life happens.
Absolutely. Just me being 25, I could not go to college until I turned 24 because my dad is disabled, and I had to prove that he was disabled.
Mm-hmm.
So I would have to take him in person down to go get the correct documentation.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not physically take him.
Right.
So I couldn't get a Pell Grant, because until you're 24, it goes off your parents' income.
Mm-hmm.
So, I waited a really long time to start school, and I don't think that it's fair. I remember going to school, and I was working, 50 plus hours a week, and coming home and making sure that my homework was done, and making sure I had gotten something to eat, and I hardly had any furniture. I couldn't afford nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling so deflated because I feel like I was working so hard, and then I was getting absolutely, utterly nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up having to drop out of school for a long time because I had some serious health problems,
mm-hmm.
And did not have health insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So, the system is not designed to benefit me. It is definitely not designed to benefit minorities. I think that, I don't want to be cliche whenever I say this, but I do feel like there will be some type of revolution coming.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees with that. I've heard that a lot.
I think that it's just really coming to a head.
Mm-hmm.
People my age are more vocal and adamant about change.
Mm-hmm.
And,
mm-hmm.
and that's just kind of like what I was saying earlier at the beginning of the podcast, where it's refreshing whenever I meet someone who's older who shares the same views, because so many times have I been told, I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
And it's really bothersome because, life is just so different than what it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same economy. It's not, and I don't think that it's outrageous for us to demand certain things. You know, like we don't want water supplies being contaminated. We don't want Native Americans forced off, you know, the land that we let them have because we took everything else.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we don't want oil being drilled on these, you know, like these things don't feel crazy to us. And then so whenever people say that we're being just like crazy and unrealistic, it sucks, honestly. I think that a lot of us like know what we want, and we're just trying to figure out how, you know, we're gonna get it. I have seen more civil unrest in these last few months than I have ever seen in my life. And I really do think that it is going to get bad.
It's going to get real bad.
Unless
I agree.
people pay attention. And I just, people want to say you know, I can understand the BLM movement, or I can understand this, but the looting and the rioting, I can't get behind. And I guess I kind of understand where they're coming from, but the thing is that what do people pay attention to? Money. And whenever things start being destroyed, people are going to start looking. And again, there's always going to be people who take advantage of a situation.
Of course.
And I just don't think that it's fair for, you know, like all protesters to be looped in this, or, you know, like labeled as looters and rioters. If I was in a situation where I had the opportunity to loot and riot, would I loot? Probably not. Would I riot? Yes. I don't have respect for corporations. That if a Walmart gets completely destroyed, that Walmart is gonna get rebuilt. Okay, they have insurance set aside,
that's correct, yeah.
for stuff like that.
Well, what about the small businesses, though?
I do disagree with small businesses. I don't think that the people who work hard and invested, you know, their blood, sweat, and tears, possibly life savings, should be harmed. That's not what this is about. Corporations, though, yeah, I don't give a fuck about those.
Do you think that the right or the left have come in and sort of tried to hijack the movement? To give BLM a bad name?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. You know, I've heard radical leftists like thrown around, and I didn't even know there was like, you know, you know, radical right exists, but it's like, what is radical left? You know, like people who want good pay and, you know, education, and how, you know, it's like, if that's radical left, then like, sure, I'm about it. But yeah, people are definitely coming in to paint things a certain way to fit their narrative. You know, let's say the right comes in and there's, you know, they're a bunch of like looters and rioters and those are bad people, and, you know, like the left might come in and say like, these things are happening and we need to pay attention. You know, obviously, you know, this civil unrest is like happening for a reason. You know, we need to try to understand where these people are coming from. I'm not saying that everyone on the left does that, but, you know, but people are always going to paint it a certain way. And I just, whenever stuff like that comes up, I just try to, like, you know, gently remind people, like, hey, you know, there's always going to be that person that exploits the situation. But
when I see looting and rioting and civil unrest, I think that's a failure for democracy. If they would have been doing their job, and likewise, if we would have been doing our job to keep them in check, it almost feels like we've been asleep at the wheel for the past 4-5 years anyway. And I'm not sure if that's a Trump thing or not. I don't really know. I just know that there's definitely a problem there, and these things that are happening now are earmarks to those problems and point directly to a bigger issue, I worry that the message gets lost in the narrative. You have younger people such as yourself who are out there demonstrating and fighting and trying to change stuff, and that's great. I'm not taking away from that. But some of them, I won't say all of them, I think some of them don't even really know what they're fighting about, what they're fighting for. They're just out there to fight, you know?
And I can agree with that. There's always going to be the people that jump on the bandwagon.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's people on my Facebook that whenever something tragic happens, like this 17-year-old kid that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, crossed state lines with his assault rifle.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone's like posting about it, but then the further away we get from stuff, the less and less like people
Mm-hmm.
post about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's always going to be bandwagon people, but
Mm-hmm.
honestly, even so, the more the merrier, because the body count does absolutely matter. The numbers absolutely matter. But people like to forget that writing is the American way.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I've gone back and forth with people who say, you know, they shouldn't be writing. It completely just cancels out what, you know, they're standing for, and no one's going to listen to that. Writing has been the only way
Mm-hmm.
where people have listened. There has definitely been at least 10 different riots, definitely more, with union labor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know, people were not paid good at all. They did not have the proper PPE equipment. I listened to a podcast. You would probably love it. I love it. It was the Stuff You Should Know, but it was about the Hoover Dam, and it was talking about how that thing was built, and they had people who tied rope around themselves, no hard hat, jumped off the side of the cliff, and would have a jackhammer lowered down to them, and they would have to jackhammer into the side of this cliff
Mm-hmm.
to install the metal pipes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they did not have they just didn't have the proper equipment. So I think that there is I don't want to say system, but there are definitely like steps that happen. And I think that the majority of the steps go ignored, and then it comes to a head, and then everybody is like, whoa, like where did this come from?
Yeah.
You
Why
know?
didn't you tell us?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they wanted better pay. And they're like, nah. And then, you know, they wanted actual, like, hard hats. And they're like, no. You know, they wanted just better living arrangements. Like, for instance, there was nothing around the Hoover Dam. They created a town where the people lived, specifically, who were working on, you know, like, the Hoover Dam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and then eventually whenever people rioted, it was just like, where's this coming from? And that's kind of like how I feel about it now. You know, people didn't listen whenever athletes were taking a knee during the national anthem.
Yeah.
They did. I mean, they critiqued them, but they weren't listening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and so all these things have happened. You know, like how many instances have there been Black people who have gotten shot by police for no reason?
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so when people are like, hey, like, that is not okay, like, that officer needs to be suspended,
I agree.
you know, without pay, and the police department is like, we did an internal investigation and found no wrongdoing.
Yeah.
That upsets people.
Yeah.
And that can only happen for so long
Mm-hmm.
before people are fed the fuck up.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever people, you know, try to talk about like looting and rioting, all I gotta say is material stuff does not equal
Human life. Right.
It just
Right.
doesn't, you know. So I think that there's just yeah, we have come far, but there's more to do, and I think that it is our job to help out everybody, especially minorities, But I think that it's also time to hold the government accountable. I think that the government should work for its people. I do not think that it's the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever people just like blindly like trust the government, and I'm like, you are out of your damn mind, you know. Like I've been telling my boyfriend, like, hey, I feel like we should stock up on ammo. I have a feeling that they're gonna try to come in and, you know, like do something with the guns, and you know, I feel like we should, you know, do this, just because it's like I really feel like we're heading in a direction, and once we like pass a certain threshold,
you're not going to be able to come back.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I think we're at that point where we're not going to be able to come back now.
Yeah, I'm honestly maybe. And there's so much, and I mean, it's systematic. It is in every single layer, and it's just like we're going to have to start ripping off layer by layer. But it's almost like, where do we start? We're exhausted from working more than full-time hours. You know, a lot of people have 2-3 jobs, going to school, just taking care of us on our own, and we're tired. And it's really hard to be compassionate or empathetic or sympathetic with other people's issues whenever we're so just drained, taking care of us and ourselves.
Yes, enthralled in our own life.
Exactly. So it's like, how do we even fix this? And I think that I think everyone more or less needs to be on the same page, you know, and stop listening to the people above us telling us, hey, the people below you are the problem. You know, it's the people on the welfare, it's the people on the food stamps, it's the people leeching off your taxes. You know, the problem isn't down, the problem is up. I think like I said, I think that the government needs to be held accountable. But first, people need to care. People need to care that, you know, this stuff is happening. Like, Rick Scott. He used to have a whole bunch of shares in this drug testing company. Rick Scott was so adamant about pushing for drug testing in order for people to be able to receive their welfare. That's conflicting. You know, that's pretty convenient for him, I feel. So he sold all the shares to his wife, and you know, she profits from them. And when called out about it, he was like, well, I don't have anything to do with it. You know, like, so
deniability.
Exactly. So stuff like that, I don't think that it's okay. And I mean, pretty much the government on every level, I think that it just needs to be reformed. But it's like, how, when things have been this way for so long. I don't think that they should. First of all, they're paid like way too much. They're paid way too much. They all have healthcare. They don't got to worry about that. And I want to say, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that even when they're not in, you know, the House of Representatives or the Senate any longer, I want to say that they still receive like a pension and they have their health insurance. You know, and that's not okay whenever there's hundreds of thousands of Americans dying from things that are preventable, with preventable care.
Right.
I don't think that they should have as much time off of work as they have, and I don't think that they should be able to serve as long as they do. You know, there will be people in their goddamn 52 years, you know, so, you know, like, obviously they probably think a certain way.
Well, it's an old school thinking, but I wouldn't be surprised if after this next election, or possibly even the one after it, where they start actually looking at term limits, because I think people have brought enough attention to that that's not something that we want to do anymore.
I think that would be a wonderful start. But it's so weird whenever I go to engage someone, because I can't tell you how many times I've been called a libtard or a Democrat and stuff. And, you know, whenever I start talking about guns, I throw everyone off. You know, I just took a concealed carry class. I do believe that we have a right to our guns.
Now, how do you line yourself politically?
I do not feel like my views align with any party.
Okay.
That's why whenever people are like, Democrat, and it's just like, what? Like, because I do agree with some Republican policy, but we're so centered around this like two-party system that it's like, it feels like picking the lesser of two evils. Am I going to crush my left hand or my right hand? It's just it's not okay. And anytime there's been like a third-party candidate like come up, I hear people say, that's never going to work. They're not going to have enough votes, like with what's going on now. It's, I've heard vote blue no matter who, I think Biden is disgusting. And he's creepy, and I've seen way too many videos of him trying to kiss and smell on little kids. He doesn't sit right with me. I don't like his policies involving weapons. I just don't. Do I think that Trump should be reelected? Absolutely not. But I honestly do not like maybe I do like him a little bit better, only because he doesn't outright say the crazy stuff that Trump does.
Right.
I think that Trump has created a very hostile environment. I think that he has given a platform to a certain group of people who feel like it's okay to spit their shitty racist rhetoric without consequences. I like whenever he was giving a speech before he was elected, and some guy punched another guy in the crowd, and he was like, hey, I'm gonna pay the legal fees for that guy, that's not what you do. Okay, you do not create a divide amongst your people. He should be preaching like tolerance and working together, finding a common ground or something. And
that just doesn't sell, though.
I guess not. I mean, it would sell to a certain group of people.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to fire up his base, and that's what that was all about. And it's a salesman tactic. It's not a presidential move, I don't think.
Absolutely not. So yeah, I feel like he's given a platform to these people who at some point started to feel like, hey, I shouldn't say this, like out loud. Like, someone's not going to be okay with this. But whenever there's no like repercussions, what's stopping them from saying it?
You're right. They will go as far as you let them go.
Absolutely. So I'm genuinely scared. I'm genuinely scared about this upcoming election because I honestly have no idea which way is going to go. Which I know that it's typically pretty close anyways. No president, usually wins by like a landslide. Like it's pretty neck and neck. But I'm terrified of what the Trumpers, or how the Trumpers are going to feel if he's reelected. If they're like untouchable or whatever. And I'm pretty scared of what's going to happen whenever Biden's elected too. And this other option that Joe Jensen, or whatever her name is, I've seen like a couple people who are voting for her, and I've seen other people tell them like, you're just throwing your vote away. If you vote for third party, like, you're voting for Trump. And I kind of feel that way too, but I wish I didn't. But I only feel that way because I have no idea how many people are actually going to vote third party, because so many people feel like, well, if I vote third party, that's a vote for him, essentially. And like I was looking up statistics of the people who voted in this last election, and out of all the people who did vote, more people did not vote. And I think that's a problem. I've met so many people who are like, I'm not going to vote. It doesn't matter anyway, blah, blah. And I think that I do think that it matters. It's, and I feel like it's mostly like my age group. My age group isn't getting out and voting. And I remember last election, I remember seeing signs, and it was like a picture of like an older man, like baby boomer, I'm sure, and it said something like, I'm voting today.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was like posted everywhere. So, right, you know, like everybody, whenever I went to go vote, everybody, like I think I was like the youngest person in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, God, this is not okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no idea what's going to happen, but the current two-party system, I feel like that's got to change as well, because I know that the majority of the people that I know and I'm friends with, they do not feel like they're Republican nor are they Democrat. You know, their views don't align with any party, so it's really difficult to align ourselves with, you know, like.
You know, I find it real funny that here we are 4 years later, and we're right back at square one, looking at the lesser of two evils. I don't think let me back up a little bit. The whole two-party system thing bothers me as well, but look at the choices that were given, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
They couldn't find a better choice than Joe Biden.
Thank you.
The Republican Party couldn't have said, maybe Trump isn't the right guy for us. I mean, he's done what he's done for 4 years. Maybe we need to get someone else in there. That's my problem as well, is I don't feel that I align with left or right. I feel that you can take bits and pieces from each one. But I don't believe that's a left or right policy. I think that's just being a decent human being, like you said. I mean, looking out for your fellow man. But that's the thing about sustainability, is it's got to sustain itself somehow. And I mean, I don't have all the answers, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I do.
You know, I really don't want to be that person, but I unapologetically really did like Bernie Sanders. I feel like he would have done so good, and you know, his ideas weren't outrageous. It was reasonable. It was what like it appealed to someone like me. Why, you know, I'm working and I'm sick, you know, I need surgery, I can't afford it, you know. Every other developed country has universal health care. What is the problem? You know, and I think that what really hurt him was socialism. People are so scared of that word. And honestly, I do not know why, because whether people want to admit it or not, we are a socialist country, and they want to deny it, but we have school buses, public transportation, the police department, the fire department, EMTs, I can't think of any more, but you know, there's so many things that our taxes pay for that seems absolutely absurd if we did away with it, you know. That why can't we figure it out? Other countries have, and apparently we're the best of them all, which I don't agree with.
Right.
But I think that we are extremely behind on getting with the program. I feel like universal health care is not far-fetched. And if that means that I'm paying a little bit more into taxes, then so be it. And there's always going to be like privatized healthcare. You know, like in these other countries, they don't have to have the public healthcare. They can go with something else, different coverage, you know. So when people say, what's going to put, you know, it's going to eliminate health or private healthcare, it's going to eliminate all these businesses. No, those places are going to be there. Yeah, maybe some, but it's also going to create a whole lot more jobs. You know, people are going to go to the doctor more. They're going to need more doctors, more nurses, more RNs, more dentists. You know, it's...
I do know this. I won't say that I have a problem with universal health care. I have a problem with the way it's set up. So let me backtrack a little bit. Like Canada, they've got free healthcare, but it's and I've talked to a few people about this. It's a well-known thing that it's free healthcare, but you could break your arm and it might take you a month to get in and see a doctor, because there are just so many people who have free healthcare. it floods the system a little bit. In fact, I know Canadians who have come to America to get treated because it would have taken so longer in Canada. My viewpoint is, instead of focusing on giving everybody free healthcare and working on universal healthcare, why can't we regulate what doctors and hospitals charge? Because, in my opinion, when you go to the emergency room and they give you a Motrin, that damn Motrin should not cost $500, you know?
Oh, that's not even opinion, that's fact.
Yeah. So, I mean, and here's the thing. If you could say, look, we're not going to worry so much about universal health care, we're going to flat rate everything. And I think that you would find that struggling families, poor families who don't have health care, if you could tell them, look, to get a full physical or anything looked at, it's going to be less than $50. Unless there's something just majorly wrong and we have to go in and take care of something, we'll flat rate that too, but it's obviously going to be more than $50. I think you would have a lot more people doing preventive maintenance so that you don't have to wait 5 years because you think you might have cancer, but you have to choose between Pampers and pills. But by the time you get in, your quality of life sucks because you've waited so long. Your mortality rate is a lot lower because now you're at stage 4, and your treatment options are a lot more expensive because you have to have more aggressive treatment. Now that's just for cancer. That doesn't count, everything else that we've got going on, So why do we charge that much for healthcare? And that's where my problem comes from.
I think that is a terrific point. I would love to see a cap put on services like that.
Mm-hmm.
With which I have heard that Canada has had long wait times for stuff, and I haven't heard people coming to the United States, but I have heard of people leaving the United States and going to Mexico for dental work and stuff, because flying there, driving there, and staying there, recovering and coming home is still cheaper than what it would have gotten to be treated here. But I think that other places have had universal health care long enough that we would be able to look at it and model it in such a way that we don't have the same problems as they do. Taking advantage over the fact that other people have done this a lot longer than we have, and learning from their mistakes. But honestly, on that note, I love the idea of certain services being capped a lot, actually. And I don't know if I just feel so strongly about this because literally 2 days ago, my boyfriend and I paid a hospital bill. We lived in Illinois for a short amount of time. He does, the fancy term is high voltage, electrical distribution underground. The non-fancy term is he digs ditches for these things to go through. But he never gets sick. He never ever gets sick, and if he's not feeling good, he sucks it up. I don't think I've ever met someone that works as hard and diligently, consistently like he does. I've even held myself to a different standard after seeing what he does. And I remember we were in Illinois, and he was feeling really bad. And he looked really bad. When he tells me that he's okay, he's okay. I think that he would tell me if he's not. But he was looking really bad. And, I started, poking and prying, trying to get him to tell me, and he had made the comment that he was actually worried. And I was like, oh, okay, well, we need to go to the doctor then. And, he was a little hesitant at first, and I was like, I'm a firm believer in listening to your body, and maybe that's just because anytime something has happened with me and I've gone to the doctor, it's been something serious, My stomach hurts, I go to the doctor, and, they ask me, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I'm working, and they're like, no, you're not. You're having your gallbladder removed because you're about to be septic.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's always been something nuts. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you know, babe, if your body's telling you something's not right, I think that you should listen to it. You know, so we go to the hospital, and we were immediately seen, which was nice. You know, there was like nobody there, which is a nice change of pace than the hospitals here.
Yeah.
And they, you know, they came in and asked him what was wrong, and, you know, he explained, and they took some blood. I think they gave him some, like, ibuprofen. You know, that was it. You know, we sat there for a while, and, you know, they came back and told him, like, you know, you might be feeling bad because of this, but we don't really know what it was or anything. And immediately, whenever they said that, he was just like, the look on his face, I knew that he was like, why did I come? You know, and I hate to think if I, like, contributed to, like, him worrying, but like I said, he really did look bad. So he was like, God, I don't even want to know what this hospital is going to be. Like, we've been here for 2 hours, and they did some blood work and, you know, gave me some ibuprofen or whatever. So the hospital bill comes in, and it's like almost $2,000.
Yeah.
And he is like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
So I typically, like, handle his affairs in, like, such a way, if something needs to be called to and discussed, I call on his behalf, because, you know, he gets up at 3:30 to go to work, and then by the time he gets home, you know, all these places are closed. So I typically call on his behalf, and so I had them send me an itemized bill.
Right.
I said, every single thing that was done to him, I want to see the charge next to it. Because I learned this little trick of, like, how you were saying earlier with the, you know, $500 for the Motrin. Hospitals do not want you to see that they're charging you $100 for a Band-Aid, you know? So when that itemized, you know, his bill was out like $1,900. The itemized bill was a couple $100 less.
Yeah.
And I can only assume it's because they had bogus charges on there that they did not want me to see. And then, you know, it was broken down, like, the majority, the bulk of that money, that it was like, you know, $1,000-something was because the physician came into the room and talked to him and left. The physician charge was a separate charge than the, you know, the actual, like, visit.
Right.
And he was just like, you know, this is absolute bullshit. And so we, you know, we just paid it off, you know, a little while ago, but why is it that much? You know, it shouldn't be that much. So I think that that's a wonderful idea. I do think that there should be a cap, or, you know, just that should be regulated.
Right.
And men, you know, if they're worried about losing money, maybe they wouldn't, because more people would go to the doctor.